we wish we didn't have to be here, but unfortunately, events that have happened in Columbus have forced us again, and this is one of several times now that this county has had to step up and defend our residents, one of our residents' most basic rights, which is the right to vote. And let's just quickly go through the history of this county when it comes to this issue. And we know what happens when we do not have extensive early voting in this county. We know it because in 2004, Ohio and actually Cuyahoga County in particular got a lot of unwanted national attention because we had long lines at the polls. You know, the estimate is that up to 175,000 people who wanted to vote were not able to vote in 2004 because of long lines at the polls. You had polling places that were open well past midnight. And in response to that, state leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, said, let's fix this by having early voting. And we've done that, and we've had relatively air-free elections ever since that time. Well, unfortunately, I think for some people, even though there were not problems at the polls, the elections did not necessarily turn out the way that they wanted them to. And now all of a sudden you've had a movement all across the country, and believe me, we understand that it is part of a national strategy to make it tougher for people to vote. So there have been a number of things that have been passed in Columbus. Senate Bills 205, 216, and 238, as well as Secretary of State Husted's recent directives. And here's the bottom line is, it's going to be tougher if these provisions stand to vote in 2014 than it was just a few years ago. And we're heading in the wrong direction. We're trying to run against the tide of history, and it's a terrible mistake. Now, in particular, one of the provisions, I'll just mention two that are being threatened. First of all, Sunday voting and in-person early voting the week before, including in the evening hours the week before the election, is being eliminated by the directive of the Secretary of State. Now, for anyone who believes that these things are being done in the name of fairness or equality, here's what we know. We know that in 2008, in Cuyahoga County, where the African American population is only about 29% of the voting population, that the number of early voters that either voted in person, the in-person early voters, that's either Sunday or in the evening hours the week before the election, 78% were African American. So who are these restrictions going to affect? The people that are implementing and forcing these things on the electorate know exactly who it's going to affect. And that was the cause, in my opinion, for them instigating these things in the first place. Now, the second thing that they're doing is back in 2011, we basically forced the state to send absentee ballot applications statewide for the first time in the history of the state. It was a huge step forward. And we were able to do that because this county government, with the support of Councilwoman Simon and her colleagues on county council, we basically said, look, if the state isn't going to mail absentee ballot applications, then we're going to do it. And that gave us the leverage to force the entire state to do it. So what does this legislation do? It takes away by law the county's right to send out absentee ballot applications. Again, there's no reason to do this except to really put the decision about whether they're mailed out at all into the hands of the state. And quite frankly, given their track record on these things, I don't trust them to do the right thing. They haven't been doing the right thing, and I don't trust them to do it in the future based on what we've seen. Now, our legislation that is being co-sponsored by Councilwoman Sunny Simon and myself just does a couple basic things. Number one is it establishes voting rights as a primary goal and mission and purpose of county government itself, and that's important. Number two, we're stating our right to mail out absentee ballot applications by the county doing that ourselves, because we believe, again, that's a fundamental role that we should preserve. Now, sometimes I've been asked, well, doesn't that put us in contradiction to state law? And I would just say this, that in my opinion, state law is in contradiction to federal law. They've already been overruled a couple times by federal courts with the last minute changes that they've tried to make to our election system. Every single time it's been something that's been in violation of the Voting Rights Act, or it's been something where they're restricting and suppressing our right to vote. So we think we're consistent with the U.S. Constitution, with the Voting Rights Act of 1964, and what the legislative intent was. And we think it's the state government that's actually in contradiction to the law, but we'll see. The last thing that it does, that we've been doing recently, that I just want everybody to know, and it's not necessarily a part of this legislation, but it's just as important, is we're collecting information from every major metropolitan area in Ohio about who is being affected by these changes. I mentioned before that 78% of those who voted in person back in 2008 were African American, but we want to get updated information of who availed themselves of these opportunities in 2012, not just in Cuyahoga County, but also in Columbus and Toledo and Dayton and Cincinnati and some other places. Why are we doing that? Because we are planning on challenging these in federal court. We've done it before. We did it successfully. Not everybody knows that back in 2012, when Secretary Husted tried to do a lot of the same things, which was change the voting rules in the middle of an election season, we were one of the parties that took him to court. And we were successful because they were trying to violate the Voting Rights Act, and the federal court threw it out. Now, I am saddened that we have to keep doing this. I would love not to be able to talk about something else, or for us to get about our business of what people elected us to do. I don't know anybody who was elected on a platform of making it tougher to vote. But for some reason, and I think we know the reason, this keeps happening over and over and over again. And we are going, just like we stood up against it in 2011 and 2012, we're going to challenge them and fight them every single time they do something like this. Every single time. Regardless of politics or elections or anything like that. Every single time they do this, we're going to stand up for the residents here in Cuyahoga County. I have with me, first of all, a lot of community members here from the faith community, nonprofit community, civil rights community, and they're here as well. But at this time, I also want to recognize my colleague in county government, Councilwoman Sunny Simon, who's going to say a few words about this proposal as well. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Executive. I just want to say on behalf of myself as a county council person that I don't think there's anything more important that we can do as a county body, a new charter government, to ensure the rights of our residents, the right to vote, and to make it easier, not harder. We're a charter government, we have home rule, we have to stand up for what's legal, what's lawful, and what's right. So we're going to move forward with this to make sure that our county is going to be a leader in ensuring that every resident can vote and vote easily and readily.
And I would mention, we're going to be introducing our legislation today. We're also looking at drafting a charter amendment that people in this county would have an opportunity to vote on. One of the powers of a county government that under this form of county government is we're a chartered community. We're allowed to adopt our own ordinances and our own charter, and we think this is something that should be in the charter. It should be one of those things that's a permanent feature of county government. Now, I don't know if I'd be able to recognize everybody that's here with me and behind me. I'm going to do something very dangerous. I'm going to turn the podium over to anyone behind me who'd like to speak to this issue. So let's hear from a couple people. If there's anybody here from the community that wants to say a word or two about this issue, please do so. Councilman Jeff Johnson.
Hi, I'm Councilman Jeff Johnson. I came here to support Executive FitzGerald as well as Councilwoman Simon. When he speaks about those people impacted by the reduction of access to the polls, those are my folks. You know, I represent South Collinwood, I represent Glenville, I represent Euclid Park, and it is my expectation that Cleveland City Council will be drafting a resolution of support for what is being done here, and so that there is complete understanding that City Council of Cleveland and the County Council are together on this initiative by the county. I just want to be here to say that. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else want to speak to this? Questions? Any questions?
Would you be able to say, is the intent of this that you're introducing today to force this issue into the courts?
Well, I think we could sue just on the basis of the fact that I think it's a violation of the Voting Rights Act. You know, it will be their choice whether or not they sue us if we end up following some of the provisions. So, you know, I think it's part of a legal strategy. I don't think it's the only, I don't think it's necessary to do this in order to get it into court, because I think that at the moment that that bill was signed into law by Governor Kasich, that's when the violation of the Voting Rights Act took place. I think this strength, it gives us a different angle though, because we have certain powers under home rule that most communities do not have. And there's only 2 counties in Ohio that really have home rule powers because we have our own charter. There's only 2 counties out of 88 in Ohio that have their own charter. So I think it'll put us on a firmer footing if we do find ourselves in court eventually. where we say, look, we're allowed to do this under our home rule powers. Gives us another legal argument. Anything else?
How much did it cost you to send the ballots out in 2011?
Well, we didn't end up doing it because what happened was we were threatened with legal action from a whole bunch of people in Columbus. We had reserved, a few $100,000. It wasn't. I can get you the exact number later, but it was well under $1 million. I know that. But basically what happened was the state said, don't do it or we're going to sue you, and we said, okay, we'll see you in court, and we called their bluff and we appropriated it through council, and then they said, well, we'll agree to send them statewide. So some people have short memories about that, but that's the only reason they were sent statewide in the first place. But I will say this, these arguments that have been made by some of the folks in the legislature, that they're doing this to save money. Look, we've done a lot of things to save money in county government. Cutting back on voting hours is not one of the things that we choose to do to save money. That to me, if you're going to come up with a list of things that you're going to pay for, securing the right to vote and making it available to everybody is arguably the first priority. So we would just say thanks, but no thanks. And first of all, I don't think that's what's inspiring this. It is not an accident that these laws are being proposed in state after state after state. And every single time, it's been Republican legislatures and Republican governors that have done this, whether it's in North Carolina or Texas or anywhere else. And so this whole argument that all of a sudden they're very concerned about saving us money, if they were so concerned about that, they shouldn't have cut the local government fund by 50% if they really want to save us money. Any other questions from esteemed journalists? Listen, I appreciate you very much coming out. Some of us will be around for a while if you want to follow up with us. Thanks very much. Thanks to everybody for being here. Thank you.